In March 2021, something extraordinary happened on Wall Street. A man almost nobody had heard of lost $20 billion in 2 days. Not a hedge fund, not a bank. One man. And the most shocking part? Almost nobody saw it coming. His name was Bill Hwang, and his story is one of the most staggering financial collapses in modern history. Sung-Kook Hwang was born in South Korea in 1964. He moved to the United States as a teenager, studied economics at UCLA, and eventually landed a job at Tiger Management, the legendary hedge fund run by Julian Robertson. Robertson was one of the greatest investors of his generation, and the people he trained became known as Tiger Cubs, a network of elite fund managers who went on to run some of the most powerful money in the world. Bill Hwang was one of them. In 2001, Hwang founded his own hedge fund called Tiger Asia Management. He focused on Asian markets, Chinese and Japanese stocks, and for a while, he was extraordinarily successful. Assets under management grew into the billions. Investors loved him. He was seen as a brilliant, disciplined stock picker with an almost uncanny ability to read the market. But in 2012, everything changed. Tiger Asia pleaded guilty to wire fraud after federal investigators found that Hwang had traded on inside information about Chinese bank stocks. The fund paid $80 million in penalties. Hwang was banned from managing outside money in Hong Kong. It was a serious blow, the kind that ends most careers on Wall Street. But Bill Hwang did not disappear. Instead, he did something unusual. He converted Tiger Asia into a family office, a private investment vehicle that manages only personal wealth, not outside investors. He called it Archegos Capital Management, because family offices don't manage public money. They face far less regulatory oversight. They don't have to disclose their positions. They operate largely in the shadows. And in those shadows, Bill Hwang began to build something extraordinary and extraordinarily dangerous. Without the constraints of outside investors or regulators watching closely, Hwang swung for the fences. He concentrated his portfolio in a small number of stocks and used enormous amounts of leverage, borrowed money, to amplify his bets. He worked with the prime brokerage desks of major banks including Credit Suisse, Nomura, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. But here is what made Archegos truly dangerous. Hwang did not buy stocks directly. He used financial instruments called total return swaps. In a total return swap, the bank buys the stock and Hwang gets the economic exposure, the gains and the losses, without actually owning the shares. This meant his positions never appeared on any public filing. Nobody outside his circle of bankers knew how large his bets had become. By early 2021, Archegos had taken massive leveraged positions in a handful of companies: Viacom CBS, Discovery, GSX, Takedo, Baidu. Through swaps and leverage, Hwang had exposure to positions worth over $100 billion. His actual capital was somewhere around $20 billion. The leverage ratio was staggering. In some cases, he was controlling $5 or $6 of stock for every $1 of his own money. For a while it worked. The stocks climbed. Hwang's wealth ballooned. By some estimates, he had become one of the 50 richest people in the world, a fact that almost nobody knew, because almost none of it was visible. Then, in late March 2021, Viacom CBS announced a stock offering. The news hit the price. The stock started to drop. For Archegos, leveraged to the hilt, even a moderate decline triggered margin calls, demands from the banks to put up more collateral or have positions liquidated. Hwang could not meet the calls. What happened next was a fire sale of historic proportions. Goldman Sachs moved first, quietly offloading billions in Archegos positions before the broader market understood what was happening. Morgan Stanley followed. Within days, block trades worth tens of billions of dollars were flooding the market. Viacom CBS, Discovery, GSX. The stocks collapsed. Credit Suisse and Nomura, who had been slower to act, were left holding the bag. Credit Suisse alone lost over $5 billion. Nomura lost nearly $3 billion. In total, the banks that had extended credit to Archegos lost somewhere between $10 and $15 billion combined, and Bill Hwang, his $20 billion in personal wealth was essentially wiped out in 48 hours. The collapse of Archegos sent shockwaves through the financial world, not just because of the size of the losses, but because of what it revealed. Here was a man who had already been caught committing securities fraud, who had been banned from managing money in an entire jurisdiction, and yet the biggest banks in the world had quietly extended him billions in credit and never told each other how much. Each bank thought it was one of a few lenders. In reality, they were all massively exposed to the same concentrated bets made by the same man. In April 2022, Bill Hwang was arrested. Federal prosecutors charged him with racketeering, securities fraud, and market manipulation. They alleged that Archegos had artificially inflated the prices of its own holdings by using swap positions to drive up demand, creating a feedback loop that made the portfolio look more valuable than it was. The case went to trial in 2024. Hwang was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and racketeering. He faced the prospect of decades in prison. The story of Bill Hwang is a story about leverage, opacity, and the terrifying speed at which paper wealth can vanish. It is a story about how a man banned from one market simply moved to a less regulated corner of another. And it is a story about how the world's most sophisticated financial institutions, each protecting their own piece of the puzzle, collectively failed to see the bomb they were all holding. $20 billion, 48 hours, and nobody saw it coming.